Listen, I read a book some years ago. I can't remember how long ago it was, but I picked up a book called The Cosmic Conspiracy by Stan Deyo, and I recognized the work of a first-rate mind, and I mean that with all my heart. This guy is on the cutting edge of physics, data processing, photography. I mean, you name it, he's had his fingers in it, and wherever he goes, he turns out first-rate, cutting-edge ideas and research. His name is Stan Deyo, and he has been in and out of more things than I care to talk about right now. I don't want to cut away from his time, but I have such great respect for Stan Deyo. He's going to be speaking about the quest for Eden tonight, the Garden of Eden, and you're going to learn something that you can't even imagine. It's going to be great. Ladies and gentlemen, Stan Deyo.
Thank you, Gary. Appreciate it. Well, thank you, folks, and thank you, Gary, for that build-up there. You know, I might have done a lot of those things, but it's by the good Lord's grace, and I remember that, even here, finding the Garden of Eden, well, what I call quite by accident, but the good Lord let me stumble upon it about 8 weeks ago. So before I start, let me just thank the good Lord. Will you join me? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Blessed be thou, O Lord our God, creator of all that is. Thank you for letting us share this time together and to discover the Garden of Eden where we began. In the name of your Son, our Messiah, Yeshua ben Elohim. Amen. Todah rabbah. Okay. As you can see up here, we've got a friend of mine's picture. He's now passed on, Bentel Jones. He was the original, real Indiana Jones. And that was a picture taken of him in Israel on the coast of the Dead Sea, down near Kibbutz Kalia, which I visited as well. And I'm just going to hopefully make this PowerPoint thing do what we want here. Thank you, thank you. That artwork, actually, I'd just gotten back from Israel, and when I was teaching at the university down in Australia, and my students, you know, a lot of them were artists, and one of them came up with this drawing, which you saw there, because they all thought it was cool that they had an Indiana Jones professor at their university. Actually, when it was in 1989, when I went to Israel then, I stopped by Vendel's place in Arlington, Texas, and on the way through to Israel. And we were sitting at his coffee table, and he says, "Hey, you got to see this new digs I've got. I've found something incredible." And he gets out this scrap of paper, and he starts to draw pictures. And he said, "See this wadi here? That's the Wadi Hakipa. And you go down here, and you drive there, and you walk up here. And don't forget, when you climb up here, you'll fall if you don't reach up here and get a rope and then swing into the cave." Okay. All right. So we arrived there, and my friend and I were out there exploring that, and sure enough, the Wadi Hakipa means the little underground river coming down the side of the Dead Sea, the shoreline of which is kind of just a bunch of mud. But anyway, the Wadi Hakipa is called that because right next to it is this cave, which has a hole in the top, reminiscent of the early kippas. The rabbis used to use it. They'd wrap a hair rope around there, and they'd have a little bald spot. So this little hole, I had to be there between 11 and 1 o'clock inside that cave on the day that I wanted to explore to wait for the sun to come down, sure as I'm telling you, shine on one particular spot in the bottom of the cave, and it would illuminate the sand and turn it blue. It's a blue glow that would occur in this particular cave. And I was to go over there and then move all the sand out of the way, take the metal plate that's buried under that to keep the marauders from finding it, and then they would open up a passage down there and go down the passage. yeah, kind of in the dark a little bit, and then down a little ledge, and something dropped on my shoulder like that. And I couldn't see it. And I thought, "Gah, don't bite me, don't bite me." And just went like this, like that, and off it went. And I heard it go down there somewhere, and I realized I'm on the edge of a very narrow precipice. It happens to be the one, because Vendel told me this earlier, that there was a big rock when they were excavating that, and it actually did roll down toward him like it did in Indiana Jones movie. As the legend goes, one of his diggers that was there with him before it became a writer and took the story to Hollywood, and it became blown out of proportion. But Hollywood denies it because they don't want to pay him any royalties. Anyway, I got down to the bottom of this thing with a very small torch, and I had to go down this ramp to where this second excavation was, to a room which had been occupied by the priests of Zadok, who escaped Rome. And so you had to get down like this and crawl around and move a metal plate from the hole like that, and you could get in like that if you kneeled and crawled in. What the heck is that on my hat? It was a bat that I'd knocked down before, and he'd found me again. Stupid thing. Anyway, it was exciting because when I looked in the room with the flickering flame, it was probably a little bit bigger than this area right in here. And there were big Jordan River stones, round stones like that, stuck up into the ceiling down the walls, and they were mortared with mortar made from the Dead Sea, very salty, a lot of gypsum. And at first sight, I thought, those are diamonds in between there because they sparkled. All the mortar just sparkled. It was beautiful. And then there was a pile of black stones and a pile of white stones that the priest used in something to, balance the good and the bad or whatever. There was soot over the place where they had the altar and the candle. And Vendel eventually got about 900 pounds of red powder out of there, which was what you need in the new temple to sacrifice, to burn. You can't make it today because the plants that they originally made it with don't exist anymore. Anyway, that was Vendel and I, and he inspired me to do the Indiana Jones type stuff and to research the Bible and to learn a bit more about Hebrew. Now, why is Eden important? All right, one, to prove the Eden account in the Bible is absolutely correct down to the smallest detail. This is important even for believers. For people that are borderline believers, even more important. You need to know that what you're reading is absolutely correct. And when we find Eden today together, you will see that every clue that is in the Bible is there. You just had to read it and know where to look for it. And it's not some dust patch, and I say it was there. It is there. You can walk the ground today. You can see the walls that kept the animals in. It's an incredible place. All right. Second, to correct the concept of continental drift. Now, for those of you who don't study, geophysics or whatever, tectonic plates are what our continents sit on. And the modern wisdom in the geophysical community is that these plates are drifting apart, some toward each other and sideways, at about 1.5 inches a year or something like that. No big deal. It takes millions of years for this to happen. Well, that's not true. The people who wrote the Genesis account stood on every continent, all connected together in Pangaea. They had to see the rivers you're going to see. It is an amazing proof that science has got it all wrong. The dating is all wrong. Now let's go. Okay, now 3. What has this got to do with dinosaurs? Because we're going to look at this. The Earth was smaller in those days. It was about 20% smaller than it is now in diameter. It expanded suddenly around the time of the flood, within about 200 years of the flood, due to a large meteor impact in the Yucatan Peninsula, the Chicxulub meteor. That was good dinner, wasn't it? You think I jest. And the revenge of the Alka-Seltzer. Anyway, because the Earth was smaller in diameter and the continents were all together, the Earth was spinning faster. And for those of you who like to do math, go home and look at the change in centripetal force from now to when the Earth was smaller and spinning faster. Because as it was smaller, it spun faster. And that balanced the force of gravity to the point that gravity on the surface of the Earth at that time was 1/4 what it is now. This is a mystery that they could not solve with the dinosaurs. The bones of the dinosaurs could not support the weight. They would crush. They couldn't walk. This way they could. And this way those leather flying winged birds could fly. The air was more dense as well. And rivers would flow much further than they do now because the frictional forces were less. Gravity was lower. When you put all these things together, we're getting there. You put these things together, you're going to see why everyone missed where the Garden of Eden was, except for the people that lived next to it. And of course, the tribe there says, oh, well, yeah, I knew that. You'll see that in a minute. That's true, they did. All right, now 4, to find where the lost tribes of Shem actually settled. Why is that important? Part of it is more important in the next lecture tomorrow about Solomon, the Antichrist, and where they will be from and why. I'll show you where Shem and Ham and Japheth settled, and you will kind of be amazed when you see the distribution of the races of Earth in 3 bands today, color-wise, gene pool-wise, because of Ham being here, Shem being here, and Japheth being here. But this will also allow us with Shem to see something most extraordinary, finding out where the Mayans came from and why they had pyramids. Extraordinary stuff. All this because of the Garden of Eden. Okay, and incidentally, we locate Solomon's lost gold mines, plus the land and the ancestry and religion of the Queen of Sheba, or Shiva with a V, but that's mainly tomorrow. All right, as I said just briefly a while ago, this is also to allow you to go over and kind of make contact with your roots, to physically go to the Garden of Eden and walk in the red dirt that Adam was made from, and walk where God physically walked with him in the cool of the day in the garden. It's a beautiful place, in the wet anyway. In the dry season, it's not so good. To strengthen the faith of many and help more to believe the promise of salvation through Yeshua ben Elohim, Jesus. 8, to show the earth expanded suddenly, not gradually, suddenly in around 2200 BC. This was a catastrophic event. If you ask me what my view of world geology is, it's this. Not gradualism, not Darwinism type stuff. It is catastrophic stuff that occurred in the last 6,000 years. And I am positive of this now because of where Eden is and the descriptors that the people who gave us the description, where they had to stand and what had to be next to them. They defined, they could not have known where these rivers were unless everything was together at the time. And that was only 6,000 years ago, roughly. All right, and this will help us to identify the author or authors of the Genesis account. It wasn't Moses. And, I don't know how much people have studied this, but the early books, like Moses' book and the book of Genesis, he transcribed or redacted information from Sumerian and Egyptian documents, clay tablets. He took it from a clay tablet in the Sumerian area. We can know that because of what's called catchphrases. I'll show you the picture of it in a minute. You have this clay tablet. You write down, instead of putting page 1, then page 2, they would put, and the apple fell off the tree at the end here. And then in the continuation of the story, which is only about as big as your hand in that clay tablet, and say the apple fell off the tree. Oh, that goes to that story. Okay. It's a hard way to do it, but they were called catchphrases, catchlines. And they're there, you can see them in the English account of the Garden of Eden. In the Hebrew account, you can really see it. And I must tell you, folks, if you do not read it in Hebrew, do not translate it, you miss 30 to 40 times the information you get in English. It is just, I've encouraged so many young couples to go and study Hebrew just 3 or 4 weeks in the evening so they could read using what's called, lexicon. They could read the thing in Hebrew, and it tells you so much more about everything. There are secrets in there that, rabbis know, but you don't know. And it's just, it blows your mind. I can't begin to tell you how much is in there. Anyway, that's something we can talk about later, and I'll tell you how to get a hold of it after the lecture, how to learn Hebrew that quickly. All right, and it's to give us a better understanding of the way the world was settled after the flood, the migration patterns of human beings after the flood, and then after the flood, where they all came from, which is interesting too. All right, now, okay, I've told you this already about the length of the day, because it was spinning faster, the Earth, the length of the day was 19 hours instead of 24 hours. That meant this, that okay, every day you gained 5 hours, okay, or you lost it, depending on how you look at it. It meant that in a year, you would have somewhere around 450 days, 19-hour days. And I think at the same time, although I can't prove this, that the Earth was actually slightly closer to the sun, which meant that it would have traveled a shorter distance, would have then compensated part of this 450 days. But it means that our patriarchs, the guys that were like, 800 or 900 years old, were actually about 20% less old. In other words, instead of 600, it might have been 480, still old. But our length of year differed because of the smaller diameter of the planet. And you can see, if you think, that this is going to make repercussions into the world of physics and geology. If they will accept this, it will make things a lot easier to understand in the geological record. It's interesting. Geologists on one hand, archaeologists on the other. Archaeologists say, here, this is King Solomon's digs here. That was in about, 3000 BC. That's not true, but anyway. Okay, and the geologists over say, is that right? Okay, where's that? That's in that layer. Okay, well, actually, our carbon dating says that layer is 2 million years old. Oh, okay, well, maybe we're wrong. Okay, we'll use your 3000 BC, and they circle back and forth, quoting each other. It's in the layer of such and such, therefore it's 1 million years old. Well, it's 1 million years old because the archaeological digs over here prove that it was, 1 million years old. It's circular reasoning, and it just doesn't work. Now, if you've ever made pudding on the stove, cooked it up, and as it's coming to a boil and that skim on the top of the pudding, that milk skim, and you put your spoon in, say a wooden spoon, and you push it like that skim, you see it wrinkle up. Think of the Earth's surface like this at that time. There was something that caused the Earth to wrinkle up, and those wrinkles became the Himalaya mountains. And the flat areas were the ones that didn't get pushed up. It's this soft, fragile layer of the Earth that was pushed up to make the mountains and change everything that we see today from what it was originally. Now, the direction of east before the flood was not where it is today. This is now in red. And we'll push the little button here somewhere, and you'll see it in yellow, which is where it was. Now, you wouldn't think that would make much difference, but it makes difference in where Eden was east of. Because the Garden of Eden was in Eden. It was in the east of Eden where God dwelt. All these things piece together a great puzzle. Now, about 50 years ago, in the early 1960s, in Australia, in South Australia, a government astronomer by the name of George Dodwell discovered that he could calculate from the wobble of the Earth around its axis and that 23.5 degree tilt we're at, he could backtrack that like a top, mathematically, to where it was vertical, to when this occurred. 2345 BC, the date of the flood. That's what it turns out to be. Now, he passed on, and the government of South Australia asked a friend of mine, Barry Setterfield, another astronomer and a scientist, and a Christian fellow, to prepare Dodwell's notes for publication. Now, at the end of the lecture, I have a credit roll there, and you'll see, I don't expect you to write it down because it goes quick, but you can look in the DVD or ask me later. And you can go to their website, to the website that Barry Setterfield has set up here in this country, and read the proof of this, how the Earth took, back to 2345 BC to be straight up and down from whatever caused it. Now, between Barry and George, they reasoned that it was the Chicxulub meteor impact in the Yucatan or in the Gulf of Mexico that caused the tilt. Now, whether it was an immediate change or whether it took 150, 200 years is, kind of inconsequential, but it's somewhere in that period of time because of that impact, it put a shockwave through the planet. And it caused the core to change, and as a result, the Earth tilted. And by the way, the core of the Earth is changing at the very moment we speak. We have 2 magnetic north poles and 2 magnetic south poles at the moment that are wandering around inside the planet. The latest satellite information has shown that. So this is part of that catastrophic business. This may be happening again in your lifetime in the next few years, months even. We're seeing it happen. The one pole was moving a lot faster. North Pole was moving twice as fast as the South Pole about 3 years ago. And we know from the sun's northern hemisphere has a North Pole, South Pole in the in the northern hemisphere. And in the southern hemisphere, you have the opposite of that. So when every 22 years, or every 11 years, sorry, when the sun flips its magnetic poles, one of the hemispheres will flip first. You'll have two south poles on the sun for a bit, a few weeks, and then you'll have everything back to normal as this pair flips. But you go on the NASA site now, and you can look and see these kind of things I'm talking about. They say, well, it might happen in 1,000 years, 10,000 years. But here's the model that we've developed for it. We've wasted your taxpayer money to show you how the North Poles can make maybe 2 or 3 pairs of them in our planet. Why do we need to know that now? Think about it. Okay. Look, in a lot of ways, people see conspiracy there, and I say, look, if you're a NASA employee, an engineer in charge of that, if you're a USGS person, you know about a volcano, if you know these things that you think are going to happen, and you try to announce that to the public, you do the public a disservice if you just blurt it out. Because people are people, and they will panic and run and loot, and this is the big problem everybody's afraid of. How do we release it? So how do you do it? Rumor markets, unofficial sources, like Stanley and other people that say, look at this. And, okay, do we believe him or not? The people who think, like the wise virgins, will say, I'll look at that. That might be possible. And I will prepare for that wherever I live. Anyway, I digress. Okay, now, the Chicxulub meteor, as it came down to the Gulf of Mexico, this is the Gulf of Mexico you see here with that yellow arrow. Now, that arrow is a force line, an impact vector to show what happened. Now, try to imagine, I didn't have time to put this all together in animations, 8 weeks. Anyway, these continents were all together. They were in Pangaea. And India was just around the right side of the screen where it's blue. Africa fit in there, and then India on the right of that. So the Chicxulub impact came through the sphere of Earth at an angle like that and put a shock wave on the spinning core of the planet, which then threw it into what is now the Indian Ocean, but at the time was solid Earth, and broke it up. Now, it took about 150 to 200 years, as close as we can estimate, and I'll show you that in a minute, to figure out how long it took and why it did what it did. Now, just watch this. You're going to see the impact. All right, the meteor goes in, will flip to the other side of the planet, and then you'll see a slight bulge and then a relax, and you'll see why it takes a little bit longer. All right, let me run this back for you. There's where it is. You can see it just swelling the Earth. And if you look at it and I roll it back and forth, you see how it bulged the Earth? Now, imagine down underneath that force arrow, there's a spinning core of the planet, and it spins the impact in an easterly direction because it hit shallow. And that's why, when you look at your maps, and you're going to see them in a minute, why India got moved from its place, shoved up into Afghanistan and Pakistan, and the mountains of the Himalayas were formed for this. This is why the Himalaya mountains have sea sediment on the top of them. They were once down there. And then when this impact occurred, it shoved them up like that, split the islands of Indonesia over that way, kicked Australia down there, make the South Pole go down that way, took Madagascar and spun it off of Africa down like that. All this happened over a period of years. In fact, one pharaoh reported that, when will the earth stop groaning? Immanuel Velikovsky reported that in his book, in The Earth in Upheaval. The Chicxulub meteor was about 6 miles in diameter, made a crater 110 miles in diameter. So it wasn't a lightweight impact. It was serious business. In fact, some people tried to say that it was the result of the extinction of the dinosaurs, but then others say no, because of iridium layer differences, but it doesn't really matter. It did happen. It did make a big hole where the Gulf of Mexico is today, and it shoved Texas and various other parts of the Gulf Coast up into the United States as well. A lot of damage. Last 2005, this entry here, 2005, was something called Chandler's Wobble, which is a small wobble in the Earth's axis in addition to the 23.5 degree tilt. This wobble stopped in 2005. It's always been there. It stopped. Reverse direction by 180 degrees. I'm telling you, something weird is happening to the planet in real time, not over millions of years. It's a catastrophic thing in formation. Again, one of those strange things that comes out of looking for the Garden of Eden. Okay, now I'm going to put the Earth back together in the portion we're going to be looking at here. Now, before the impact, this is where this section of East Pangaea, the landmass of all the Earth, this is how it looked. You can see the dark spaces are where it fractured apart, and strangely enough, where riverbeds are today even. The rivers, from the river source that we're going to look at, it's a huge source of water, tore holes through that very thin film of the earth, weakened it as it flowed. And you can see in the geological maps on Google Earth and the Scripps Institute, they have the bathymetric, what do you call them, the sub-ocean maps, the depths of the ocean. And you can see where it channeled huge holes out where these rivers went into the Earth's surface before the Earth split. So when the impact occurred, it made it easy for the Earth, for the solid landmass to know where to break, the weakest points, where the river had eroded the surface. Now, I'll just move this back so you can see it here. See, now Madagascar is right next to the word Africa on the A of it. It moves down there. I didn't put in the Antarctic, but it goes down. And Australia was tucked into the side of India, just like that. Okay, all right, don't get excited. Okay. All right, now I'm going to want you to remember this. We'll have another look at this in a moment, which leads us closer to Eden. Now, here's what is the initial clue, or the initial clues to where Eden was and is. There are more clues than this in the book of Jubilees, which is not part of the Bible, but it probably should have been. And in other parts of the Bible, there are some quotes I'll give you along the way, which tell you about the characteristics of Eden, which help you, or help me in any way at the point to locate it. Now, Genesis 2:8 says, "And the Lord planted a garden eastward in Eden." So that tells you right there, wait a minute, eastward in Eden. Now, the guy telling this, whoever's writing this down on the clay tablet, or however they recorded it before Moses' time, he's saying, now, was the Lord in the east, and he planted eastward in Eden? Or was the storyteller standing here and he says, well, now look, guys, he planted a garden in Eden east of where I am. One way or the other, it was east of there, okay? So we know it's east of where the guy's telling the story. Genesis 2:9. "And out of the ground made the Lord God to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food, the tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil." Now, I didn't find that, but anyway, that's the only thing I didn't find. The verbs in Hebrew here are rather interesting. "And out of the ground made the Lord to grow every tree that is pleasant." The verb "out of the ground" comes from a people who spoke pictures, graphics first. And "out of the ground" means up out and like the limbs of a tree. Remember this. This is important to another clue. 2:10, "And a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from thence it was parted and became into four heads." That's why I'm having trouble. I left my glasses in there. Oh, well. Yes, I see. I feel it now. I feel it. Now, okay, so the water comes out of the Garden of Eden and parts and becomes four headwaters, four big rivers. Okay, so we've got to look for a spot that has, four rivers coming out. Well, that's fair enough. Some people say it's between Greenland. The Chinese say it's between Greenland and the North Pole. Some say it's, a particular religion in the United States says it's in Missouri in Jackson County or something. And it's true. I'm telling the truth, aren't I, Holly? Yeah. And then there's some that say, okay, it's in Iraq or it's in Turkey, and no, it's in Israel. But every one of these places did not fit all the clues. And they try to explain why they couldn't find it today, because that's where it was, from the flood having wiped out everything. But before you get too excited about going back to the Garden of Eden and saying, oh, we're not allowed to go back there, understand if there were an embargo, which God did put on Adam and his descendants, it was lifted when Jesus died on the cross and our sins were paid. We're allowed to go back, and now is the time we can go back. 2:11, the name of the first of these four rivers is the Pishon. That is it which encompasses, goes all the way around, the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold. Genesis 2:12, and the gold of Havilah is good. There is bdellium and the onyx stone there. Clues. What is bdellium? What is onyx stone? What has gold in addition to that that's, well, good? And what was good to the guys back in, 2300 BC or whenever this was written? In those days, they didn't have quite the smelting techniques we've got, so if they found very pure gold, that was good gold and plentiful and easy to get to. All right, that's a clue. 2:13, and the name of the second river is Gihon. The same is that river which encompasses the whole land of, in King James Version, Ethiopia. But that's not what it says in Hebrew. Clearly in Hebrew, it's K-U-S-H, Cush. And it is Cush with a K, not a C. And there are two Cushes, two lands of Cush. Cush was a son of Ham, out of Noah's the tribe. Ham and the other Cush, Ham's son Cush and the other part of Cush's territory are split. And I knew that from some other research I'd done a number of years ago, trying to find the Eden then when I just gave up and forgot about it. So Cush was also, this particular Cush with a K, was where Nimrod built the Tower of Babel. That was not in Ethiopia. He was a son of Ham, and he was out of his territory. He was a man that by force took nations and people. He was a mighty warrior. And so he was not like his other brothers in Africa at that time. He went and tried to take over a lot of places and to rule many countries, believe it or not, in those days even. Now, the Garden of Eden has been lost to us for a long time. And trying to find these rivers by names is probably not the wisest thing, but I did do that with the land of Cush, and I'll tell you about that in the next slide. The name of the third river is the Hiddekel, the Tigris today, and that is it which goes toward the east of Assyria, Ashur, which is in kind of Iraq-Iran region up in there. You'll see that in the map in a minute. And the fourth river is Euphrates in English, called Firat in Hebrew. Now, there are some references to the Euphrates in the Abrahamic covenant, telling Abraham where the borders of Israel would be forever. The generations of his descendants would have this land. So it's very important to them to know where the river Firat, Euphrates, went, because it defines much of the territory of Abraham. And it's not where you think, but I tell you what, Israel will be very happy to hear this, and some of the Arab countries are going to be very unhappy. In fact, they've already made that clear about something else that Netanyahu did the other day. Okay, I've taken you through Geophysics 101, Stanley's version, and now through the first verses in Genesis about the Garden of Eden. As far as I can tell, the Garden of Eden was lost to mankind officially around 2200 BC. The records got buried or something. But I do suspect, and I'll talk about this tomorrow, that King Solomon knew where Eden was because he went after the gold. And I did find his mines. There are 3 sites. And I'll show you that tomorrow, which is for those of you that are gold diggers and gold seekers. Sorry. But that will be of interest, and it'll help you understand a lot about King Solomon and the guy that's going to copy his behavior in our time, the Antichrist. Okay, now in Hebrew, you'll see me say, or hear me say this, and probably see it up on the screen. In Hebrew, the Garden of Eden is called Gan Be'eden. G-A-H-N is how you would say it, Gan, and then little b, Aden, A-D-E-N. Did you know there's a Gulf of Aden over? I wonder why it's there. It's been there a long time. Anyway, Gone Aden. You can make a T-shirt, I've gone Aden. Okay, now here's some of the stuff that I play with. And I know it looks, like Hebrew. But it is, once you can read the Hebrew alphabet, it only takes you a couple of weeks in a self-teach course, $12 booklet, and you can read these letters. Once you can read them, you can open up a lexicon, either Accordance Bible software or a physical lexicon, where some teams of linguists have gone in and translated every verb known in Chaldean, Aramaic, and Hebrew, and Arab. All that is all, the nouns, the adjectives, the thes, everything in this book in order in Hebrew. And you can go through and they'll say, well, this one here is, we don't know exactly what it meant. It was an antique word, came from the Chaldean, or, this country, that country. But with that, you can, and it goes from right to left, opposite of what we do, and that's important too, actually. So you will go through the Bible then, and you will go from right to left, and you'll be able to say, well, that's an aleph, or in this case here at the very beginning, you'll see a yod, and a vav, a yod, and I think it's a tet. I can't see with my glasses. And then an ayin. Yeah, okay, it's a tet. Thank you. Holly, would you sneak back there in my briefcase and in that black glasses case and let me have that, please? I am having trouble here. Anyway, now, having seen that, you could then go into this lexicon and you could look up, well, vav you wouldn't, because that's a conjunctive and it's used very commonly to hang sentences together or words. So you would look at the first thing, the yod and the tet and ayin, and you would look up what that means. And when you look it up, you'll find, well, it could mean this, it could mean that, but then if it's used in this case, it means that, and it might be that long of a description. So then you get your pencil out and you write down all the possibilities for that word. Then you look at the next one. And this is what the King James translators did, and they tried to pick the most likely path through these multiple meanings to give you the English version. And they did the best they could. But now that we know more and knowledge has increased across the planet, we can do even better. It's no reflection on them. They did a marvelous job, and I use the King James Version as my English version all the time. Okay. Now, the word, or the name, Gan Eden, thank you, darling. Oh, I can see again. Oh, that's good. That's good. You're right, it was a tet. Okay. Now, in Hebrew, the word for garden is gan. And gan is an enclosure, a protected area. It's where your animals don't get out. Nowadays, in some of the poorer countries that have thorn bushes, they weave thorn bushes together, and that forms a gan for their, for their animals, like to keep the lions and stuff out. And it's like a barnyard, except it's got thorn bushes. But in this case, it wasn't thorn bushes. It was real solid rock. And the whole Garden of Eden today is surrounded with it. It is closed in. And it's 100 square miles in area. 102 exactly. It's a big place. Now, it means to cover or protect or shield, as in build a hedge around. Now, eastward, the word in Hebrew eastward here says mikadem, and it means to the direction that the sun rises. All these things tell you a lot about the graphic language, and this is important to understand how we found this place, or how I found it, I guess. We, kind of the royal we, okay? Holly says you did it all, but she sure helped me. Okay. Now, in telling this account, as I said to you before, whoever wrote this down was westward of the Garden of Eden and probably of the land of Eden as well. And in the Book of Jubilees, there's even more description of where Eden was in the allotment of the land that Noah made to his sons, because it mentions up to Eden as far as Eden here and a river here and a valley and a crevasse there and that kind of stuff. All right. Now, let's look at, let's look at this. These are clay tablets, and, they're about this size, what you could hold in the palm of your hand, and you take your cuneiform stylus and you would press, in there to make your story. That's why it's roughly 65 lines in the Genesis account. That's why we knew that someone had taken it from a clay tablet in addition to the catch lines at the bottom and the top of these phrases in Hebrew in the Genesis account. There's a whole discussion on this that a British Commodore actually wrote a book on it. I forget his name at the moment, but it's in my notes. Anyway, it was about 540 some odd years, 545 years after the flood, around 1800 BC, that this occurred, that this particular story occurred, where it's a reed boat instead of a wooden ark, and it's a round reed boat that they found, and that's in the news recently. I don't know that I believe the description, because I believe the boat was long and rectangular for a number of reasons. And these here are the creation epic from Gilgamesh, and tells about King Akka of Kish, kind of like Cush, Kish. And again, this tells a lot of information in these two tablets on the left, and one on the right is a separate storyline. But using these things, we're able to track down a number of issues with Moses' account. This is a timeline I don't expect you to read. It's too tiny, but look at the blue bars at the top. Those, the top one is Adam from year 0 to 930 years. The next one down is Seth, his son, from 130 to, and he lived 912 years. The left, the green, if you can see any of that at all, is the date that the guy was born. Now, the Bible says that in the time of Peleg, which is, you see where that gray bar on the right, that gray rectangle on the right is with little green arrows? Right at the top of that, and over to the left, is the time of Peleg. And the time of Peleg, it says the earth was divided. Now, the two schools of thought on that. Did it mean that the language of the earth was divided and the peoples were scattered at the Tower of Babel? Or did it mean that the earth was split? It was very specific, saying the earth, Haaretz, was divided. That's land, that's dirt. So this is the time when Pangaea split, in the time of Peleg. Now, did he write this account? He was alive at the time. So were Shem's, all of Shem's sons, Arphaxad and Salah and Eber, and Peleg was a grandson of Shem. I'll show you this on the next little chart here in a minute. Okay, now, if it split in this guy's time, this tells us that it was not millions of years and little gradual tectonic plate separation at 1.5 inches a year. It was not. And I know that these guys were telling the story in this time zone, right in here in this 200-year period. They were telling it as they saw it. Oh, it was over there in the east in Eden, you know, where that river is there, where that one is there. Not where that ocean is. It was a river. And this, I mean, just by implication, this tells you that, aha, there's more to this story. Okay. Let's try to find the river that goes around Cush. Why do we take the second river first? Because the first river was too hard. Gihon. Well, no, Pishon. The Pishon. See, the Pishon. There's just so little clues on it until I got into this. I said, where do you start? I'll start with the Gihon, the second one, around Cush, because I'm pretty certain I know where Cush is. And I think you will be too in a minute, or at least, you know, within several countries that are all joined together. Now, I thought since it was after the flood that records of settlements there might bear the names, oh goodness, got to hurry along there, might bear the names of the progenitors of it, like Kish, Cush, Kosh, whatever. So I went to the map and I got on Google Earth, which I can't show you here because Google Earth has copyright restrictions, which won't allow us to do it. But I am going to make available the KML files that you can put on your computer, go into Google Earth, and you can see this in high resolution, what I saw. These little yellow pins all around here are 33 of 120 towns I found in Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India, we're beyond there, which have the name Cush, Kosh, Kishan, all that. They are Cush. And if you look at that blue river, that's the Gihon. If you look at the blue and to the bottom and to the left, you'll see a yellow pin in kind of a darker green area, and then move left of that, move left of that about 3 pins. That's where Nimrod built the Tower of Babel. Nimrod being out of place because he was a Hamitic son, and that was what was called Shem territory. Now, that river appeared to form a loop there. Now, I went over 250,000 miles or more by air over Google Earth over the last 6 or 7 weeks, tracing river bottoms and river paths and folded areas and everything, trying to find the good fit. So I thought, okay, this is one. But look at the lower right-hand part in the pink where that blue line goes off screen. You see there are 2 gouges in the dirt of the ocean there. One gouge goes towards the Persian Gulf to the left, and the other gouge kind of, well, maybe it goes up around Iran and the Kush territory there, or maybe it goes around India up through the Indus Valley. This is just the country, a map to show you where these places are. Now, there's an alternate route, and I have to take India and stretch it back down to where it was before everything fell apart in the Pangaea expansion. I have to take India, stretch it down there, and then the gouge in the sea that we saw there in the seabed will fit the Indus River Valley, go this side of the Himalayas, around down the coast, and up between Madagascar and India when they were all together, one happy little family. So I've got two possibilities for Gihon. Both of them come from the same spot. See that little orange line going over to the Gulf of Aden? Right there in the middle there. Okay, now, all right, I figured, okay, let's call that good. Let's call that Gihon. One of those two, they're close enough. They both come from the same source over there in the Danakil Plains. Okay, now I go after the next one, the Tigris. Well, now the Tigris was east of Asher. Okay, I figured that would be east of where Asher is today. And I looked at a topo map of Iran, and I thought, well, okay, it could have been pushed up. I see how the mountains are squeezed up. It could have been up along the eastern side, northeastern side of the Persian Gulf, you see there, and gone up to the upper left part of your screen, and then dive down into Asher, which is just above where that word Iraq is. And I'll show you more of that in a second. Asher is where that little yellow pin at the top left is. And this is how I saw the first path. And believe me, you go down where you're going mile by mile like this in the computer and looking for the low levels. You got to check the altitude of every place to see the river can flow there. So I traced it up there, and it fell down east of Asher and became what is today the Tigris, coming down from the mountains after this flow stopped, of course, when Pangaea broke up. The alternate route, I found another one, that lighter green one, going up and doing almost the same thing, but diving down earlier. Both of these work, and there may be a third, but these are the two that I'm happy with. So again, both of these two come to the same starting point, and you see them down the bottom where the Persian Gulf is, to the right of that Persian Gulf word. You see the carve in the bottom of the sea, and it was a deep cut. A strong river flowed into there and made the earth weak in that area. So now we have Tigris up at the top, one of two choices, coming down, joining with the Gihon, one of two choices, all originating, same place there, in the Danakil Plains at the Gulf of Aden. Now, that area there, the Gulf of Aden, if you go on land or just up inside the Afar Triangle, it's in Djibouti. It's called the Gulf of Tajura. Okay. All right, here's the clue map again. We're going to move on past this. The great river Euphrates, Euphrates. There were a number of references other than the Genesis account of the Euphrates. And these are rather telling. In the ancient time, in the ancient Hebrew, they used to use doubling of words or to indicate plural, more than one. And look here in the yellow. From the river of Egypt unto the river Euphrates, the great river, the river Euphrates, go down the next line until the great river, the river Euphrates. And these are in different books, 3 different books. Okay, and then down here from the river Euphrates, even to the uttermost sea shall be your coast. That's part of the Abrahamic covenant. Now, and all these things are telling you that the Euphrates is not one solid piece. There was more than one Euphrates. That's because it was broken in pieces. So let's find part of it here. The upper Euphrates we know about today drops down through Iraq, and it comes from up in the mountains there in Turkey, off just to the left of the screen. And the arrow shows you it flows down. And of course, the Tigris flowed up at the time and then down into the Tigris, into the valley there east of Asher. And the Tigris has to flow east of Asher to fit all the parameters. Here it is with a satellite view of the same area. You can see the lakes and ponds and stuff there. Now, where did the Euphrates, the broken part of it, where did it go? Well, moving the map to the left from where we were last slide, you see where it says Farad up the top under the word where, the W of it. That area there was where the river Euphrates flowed along what is now the coast of the Levant, of Phoenicia, of the Lebanon, of Israel. It carved a great hunk in there, and when you put the earth all back together, you see where the riverbed was. So the Euphrates did not flow down, say, like the Jordan. It flowed along the coastline. So everything from the coast, including Gaza Strip, is Israel's, and way down into Egypt to the Nile Delta there. There's what it looks like, satellite photo. Now, when you get out to the Nile Delta here, you either got the Nile River or something coming out of the Red Sea, because where the Suez Canal is, the water used to flow there. It's not that deep at all. In fact, it was shallow enough that when Moses crossed the reeds growing up, that they were the lower part of the water and they were able to get across. It wasn't like hundreds of feet deep. It was shallow. And so one of these two places was where the Euphrates started from there. That's a long way from the Gulf of Aden, but that's where it was. So let's look at both paths, the Nile path and the Red Sea path. I'm going to move a little quicker here. The Nile path is to the left, it would have gone out like this into the sea, what is now the sea, but it would have been just a riverbed, and all the way up and become the Euphrates dropping down into the Persian Gulf. There it is, satellite photo. Okay, now if we take the Nile back to its source, saying it was the original Euphrates before it broke up, it goes up into, Eastern Africa somewhere. It's still a long way from down here where we were in Djibouti. There it is, satellite. So, taking the Red Sea path of whatever was going along the Red Sea, it would have chewed right through the Suez Canal area here and turned, and it would have hit an island here, which we know is Cyprus today, and spun around and gone up over into the drop down into the Persian Gulf. Now, choosing that as a starting point, that could be made to go up here into East Africa and meet with where the Nile was. So in essence, both the Nile and the Red Sea riverbeds could be the main Farad or Euphrates bed. Here they are in red and blue on the left side of your screen. Nile in blue, Red Sea part of the Euphrates coming up the Red Sea and then up into the northern part of the Afar Triangle and up into the Great East African Rift to the source. Do the other rivers go that way? Well, let's see. Now we've got three rivers. Okay, before we mentioned bdellium and onyx. Today, bdellium is not a mineral, it's a gum. It is myrrh, like myrrh, that they took to the Christ when he was born. Incense, it's a very rare myrrh. Where does it grow? Well, it grows in Africa. It grows in Ethiopia, Chad, Swaziland, Sudan. These ones are important. Kenya, Madagascar, Tanzania, Uganda, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. Those are the major parts of interest there. Now, where is onyx found? Is it found in any of those countries I just mentioned? Onyx is found in Madagascar. Oh yeah, that was up there. India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and in southwest Tanzania. Okay, so we look up there at the map. We say, right, okay. Let's go down. Now, where is gold found in plentiful amounts? Tanzania, India, Pakistan, and Madagascar. We're starting to narrow down the choices. We're getting very close in northeast Africa. And there was a fellow that came to me and asked about it being in that area there today, and I just had to grin because whoever told him that, one of his friends that I didn't know, was right. Now, we got to find the fourth river to nail down the Garden of Eden. It's up in that region. Now, in Hebrew, you see it here in English, Joktan. In Hebrew, this is why Hebrew is so important. That word, that name of that guy in Hebrew is Yakitan. Sound familiar? Yucatan? Yakitan? You'll see why in a minute. He settled there. Now, this is all the begats and whatever. I'll just tell you right now that Sheba, Ophir, and Havilah, his descendants, all settled in a part of Africa close to each other. Historians have placed Sheba in Somalia, Ethiopia, Havilah in various other places, Ophir, they don't know. But Solomon gave us the clues to Ophir. And looking here at this genetic tree, I want you to see how the nations were divided. Ham is the dark brown area there. Noah gave him that land. And in the lighter brown underneath there and over into Australia is where his descendants migrated and settled, for the most part. And in Shem, the light tan there in Shem, you'll see that a lighter tan went to the west. Well, it doesn't look light on that screen, but it is. It's a light brown. And into Indonesia. That was the Shem expansion. And in Europe, up at the top, the left there, that you can't see up in the Iceland and all that, and over into the west coast, the east coast of the United States, all that folded around like this. Africa, Europe, and the middle part, remember the middle part here, the middle part is Shem, here. Okay, that's Shem going up toward Europe. And if you look at Shem going up into Canada and down, and where it's bright yellow, Yakitan settled in the Yucatan Peninsula. They don't know where the name came from, but they knew how to build pyramids from the guy that migrated from north of Africa there. You can see that they had the knowledge that was taught there. Now, if it was a relative of Peleg and knew where Yakitan had settled, to the east of there, straight across, is going to be Eden. Let's have a look. Could this be Eden? And could that be the river Pishon around the country of Havilah? So what is that country? It's one of the ones I mentioned. It's Tanzania, the poorest country in Africa. The poorest country in Africa. The mines are mined by multinationals, and they get the gold, and they kill the children that are mining it for them with the mercury poisoning, whatever. But the people are poor, and they have been the guardians of the Garden of Eden all this time. Madagascar used to fit up against the coast there where you see it before the split. The Blue River Havilah went around, the Blue River there, Pishon, that went around Havilah, carved out a chunk there which made that area weak when Pangaea split apart. The arrow pointing to Gan Eden is where it is. And when I saw this, the night that I saw it a few weeks ago, I thought, well, that's a special place. Who'd want to live there? Here we are, Eden in that question mark. Now, there's another clue here that tells us about this. It's going to be the next slide. East of the Garden of Eden were placed cherubim, a flaming sword that turned every which way to keep the way of the tree of life. Now, it doesn't say to keep you out. It just says to keep the way. When you translate it, in Hebrew down below that. So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden numerous, tall, flaming, glittering desolations to protect the way to the tree of life. From the verbs harob, lahat, and mithbikat. You see the definitions there. And this, underneath that arrow, is where the Garden of Eden is, in the middle of, let's say, 25 volcanoes. That's why I thought, whoops, wrong address. Over here where it says Havilah, that is Mount Kilimanjaro, 19,000 feet tall, and on the sides of it, two smaller volcanoes, and then all those little yellow pins are volcanoes around there. Now, in Ezekiel, the Lord talks to, Ezekiel writes it down for the Lord. The Lord talks to the devil, to Satan. He says, you were the anointed cherub that covered, and I have set thee so. Thou wast upon the holy mountain of God. Thou hast walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. Believe me, it's warm there. You can get around in the area. It's not that bad. But these are volcanoes, and one of them in particular has been active probably since the time the garden was active. It's the only kind of volcano like this in the world today. It's called a natron volcano. And its magma comes out at about 500 or 600 degrees Fahrenheit, half the temperature of all the normal volcanoes. And it's a carbonite. It makes fizzy water as well as fine glass bubbles that blow up and then break from their own weight. In fact, you can camp up on top of this particular volcano at the edge, touches the edge of the Garden of Eden. And it's called by the locals the Mountain of God. And the locals are the Maasai. They moved in there from Kenya. They were forced out by the British, and they became the shepherds of the area, joining with some of the local people in Arusha around the area of the garden. So it's hot stones. Eden is where Satan walked, and he walked upon the holy mountain of God. The mountain of God, the locals call it the mountain of God. Did he get up on the top? We can do it today and camp there and watch the magma flow up right on top of the volcano. So did he do it? Well, maybe he did. Well, yeah, I see that. Okay. All right, we're going to skip that. Okay, now this is a Garden of Eden. It's called Ngorongoro. The crater in the center there, where the little blue lake is in the middle of the only intact, collapsed volcano. It was as tall as Kilimanjaro. It was 19,000 feet tall. It collapsed a long time ago, before God made the Garden of Eden. And the walls are all still intact. The water for this came from the upper right, where you see that top right arrow going to where it says spring. Look at the grooves in the topography. It grooved down. Some of the water went down into Eden to water it there. Some of the water went to the northeast of, to the upper right-hand corner, and that formed the headwaters of 3 of the rivers. And the Pishon was formed under Imbakai. Here you see that on the right. Underneath that, you'll see the ridges forming down there, and it went out to form Havilah. The water that came out of that spring was a huge amount of water. The Missouri and Mississippi River system puts out 5 million gallons a second, right? The Missouri-Mississippi River system starts out in a little place in the mountains up near Yellowstone Park, and it's got 3,000 gallons a second to come out of that. And by the time it flows through the erosion path and gets the water from the catchment area, it's now 5 million gallons a second. The Amazon starts with a trickle from a little ice flow in Peru up on the top of a mountain and catches water going along the path and becomes, I forget, something like 8 million gallons per second water flow out. So even if there was only a little water coming out of the spring, it would have been able to feed a lot of rivers. But there was more than a little. It's there today. You can see it. It's like, it would be like a geyser in Yellowstone Park, except it's big. You're talking about 20-acre hole. And the water came, the verb it used says the water came up out of Eden to water. Yes, I see that. What are we doing here? I'm over time. Okay. And it flowed up like this, like tree limbs, and flowed down onto the ground. Okay, this is a satellite photo from Satellite Imaging Corporation of the garden part of this. That's kind of like a saltwater pond there nowadays. And where it says Lake Magadi, there's little spots of green you can see, and that's one of the forests there, and that's the Levi forest. And up here where you see the Layani River, it comes down from one of those volcanoes that we saw on the top part of Eden. And the Mungi River, on the right, comes from the spring that came down to feed all the major rivers plus the Garden of Eden. And there's a little forest under there in that green area. There are a number of water holes there that the rhinoceros use, and the rhinos, and even the elephants. There are 25,000 large mammals living there today. The Maasai are allowed to come in and up over the side with their cattle to graze them during the day, but they have to go home at night. No one else is allowed to go and settle there. Around the rim, because this is such a beautiful place, hotels have built accommodation that you can go to today. Kings and queens have gone there. The vice president of China went there last month. And what are they going to? Well, this is this nice, beautiful place, and it's a conservation area. Let's save the animals there. You bet. Let's save them all. You saw the birds, the zebras, the lions. That area needs to be protected. And we need to, appreciate what we've got there. They call it, well, this could be the last Eden of Africa, they say, so come visit now. Pay us your bucks and come see it now. Well, it's not the last Eden. It is the Eden. It's not the 8th wonder of the world. It is the wonder of the world. And you can go there. You can stay in a hotel. You can get in a Jeep, take a safari down inside the thing, and walk on the dirt that Adam walked on. Pick up the dirt and carry part of Adam's molecules with you. It's an amazing place. And here you can see another satellite photo of the erosions. Some figures on the water flows. I've already told you that. If you look in the upper left-hand corner there where it says water, where the E and the R are on a little blue arrow, that's showing you the 20-acre emission point for the spring that comes up rather fast. I calculated it could have been somewhere around 4 or 5 million gallons per second out of that spot. And by the time it went down over the Great East African Rift, it would have been gazillions. I don't know, but it chewed holes in the crust of the earth. It was big. And as I say, I'm going to make available a CD-ROM that has the plugins you can put into Google Earth, get high-resolution photos. I would have done it here for you now, except legally I couldn't. And you'll be able to fly over these areas down the riverbeds and into the Eden and zoom around it and use your mouse and control it and go down inside and look. And if you use Google Earth, they let people that have been there post pictures inside the Garden of Eden. And you'll see these little boxes. You can click on them and see views of what they see, what they have seen in the Garden of Eden. The land of Eden is the blue. The Garden of Eden is that little yellow, and the Eden complex, and that little green circle is the crater. The whole complex is 136 square miles. The little green circle is 102.1 square miles approximately. The land of Eden itself is, as you see, 330,000 square miles. And to the archaeologists, strangely enough, there's Omo Valley, where they found the oldest bones of known humans. And they say they're millions of years old, but they found them here in the Omo Valley at the edge of Eden. And at the old Duvai Gorge, the Leakeys found that skeleton of another old, antique human being. I forget which one of the series they put him at. But the point is, they have put the beginning of man right here. Right here. And the people that live there tell you, well, yeah, this is the mountain of God. This is where God made it. In fact, the Maasai legends say, after God made man, he went up into the sky and didn't see him again. And there are two mountains of God. People say that the Mount Sinai, where Moses talked to him, they thought that was it. They thought the Temple Mount would have been the mountain of God. That's why they were all looking over in Iraq, Iran, and Israel for the Garden of Eden. Until I found the Garden of Eden, I didn't even know there was a place called the Mountain of God by the locals. And that's it. That's the holy mountain of God. That's where Satan did his deed. That's why in Ezekiel, he said, look, you've walked in hot stones. You've walked up on the top of the mountain of God, You've been here. There are over, you can see there's over 500 species of birds. I'll tell you, those flamingos, I had to laugh. I thought anybody that's 40 years old is going to appreciate this. The number of pink flamingos that'll be on your front porch there. Let's see. Okay. Now, let's move on. We're running out of time. You heard the story about Adam and Eve, and they took fig leaves to weave their clothes because they were embarrassed once they ate of the tree of knowledge. In this crater, among the other trees, is Aiden's quinine fig tree, which is a leathery leaf, and you sew those together to make a waistcoat or, to cover yourself from nakedness. So they have that there. It's called the Ravolfia cafra plant, and it's the fig tree, fig leaf. Biologists are saying that the mitochondrial Eve came from Tanzania, right there in the Omo Valley. And that's how they traced the genetic patterns of man from Tanzania all the way around the planet here. Without putting the continents back together, they traced it by testing DNA. And you can see that even they agree this was where Eden was and is today. Okay, the movie Out of Africa was shot there. Hatari was shot there, which I don't recommend. It was a stupid movie. But Out of Africa was beautiful. Robert Redford and Meryl Streep had a picnic there on the side of the crater. And it wasn't called Garden of Eden, but it was just where they were having a picnic. And it showed you some of the beautiful scenes. In fact, we were able to, just before we came up yesterday, to get a box of DVDs from a tourist agent filmed inside the Ngorongoro Crater. And it's called Ngaro and skip my mind. It's where all the animals are there anyway in a reserve. You'd know it. Anyway, it's something and Ngaro. And you can get that video online or at Amazon, or you can get it from us here. We have, 30 or 40 of them, something like that. That's all they let me have. But it's a sales pitch to tell you to go to this place. And in there, I think it's in the first 5 minutes, he says, and it's almost like the Eden of Africa. And I'm thinking, duh. Anyway, it's really good. Okay, and you can see all the presidents that have visited there. And the old Duvai Gorge, which there was that museum where I showed you where the Leakeys were, is known as the cradle of mankind in archaeological circles, and that's, of course, why. Okay. And this is a review of what you've seen. I guess now that we're off the video, have you got any questions? Yes, sir.
Why did you have a picture of the Missouri River up there?
Well, I'd explain more about that. I did mention that the Missouri River fed into the Mississippi and that it started at Yellowstone. And I did a little bit earlier in the thing that I should have. And I was just going to show you the details of it. I can run it back if you want. Do you want to?
I'm from Missouri, so I'm not from
Yeah, well, it all starts at Browers Spring. You can look it up, Browers Spring. Yeah, just to the southwest corner of Yellowstone. It's called Browers Spring. And sometimes in the year it's 15,000 gallons a second, sometimes 3,000. By the time it flows and collects in the Missouri and feeds into the Mississippi and exits into the Gulf, it is 5 million gallons a second. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have an idea of what you think happened with the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life?
What happened to the tree of knowledge and the tree of life? I have wondered that. When I was looking at the genetic mitochondrial Eve distribution, I saw it looked like a tree of life spread. I wondered if it weren't a play on that. I don't know. The tree of life where it spread out. But, you know, it could be an actual tree that gives you everlasting life. I doubt that we'll find it there. You know, it would have been taken away if it was functional like that, I'm sure. There are some plants in there, according to the local legends, that will heal your body to the point that you live a long time. But what, I don't know. The Maasai people are, very poor, and Tanzanians all through there, they're very poor, I mean, extremely poor. And I do encourage support of the Ngorongoro Conservation Area, which comes out of UNESCO. But still, we need to preserve that. It is a world treasure. It's not Islamic, Christian, or Jewish. It is a world treasure. We all come from the same place. And whether it's got the tree of life, the tree of knowledge there, doesn't matter to me. I just love to go there myself. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I was just wondering, now this information is out there, is there any fear or concern
concern about this area now turning into the next Cancun?
No, that's a good question. Is it going to be the next Cancun now that this information is out there? The rich and famous have wandered over there, kings and queens, as I say. Prince Charles and his boys went there, and it was the place to go if you were the rich and famous. But the problem is the Islamic terrorists are all around there in the Sudan, Ethiopia, and Tanzania, and it is going to be a risk for you to go there. I'm telling you that now. I got to be fair about it. It is a risk to your safety to be kidnapped as a white American, European type going over into Africa in that area. Now, I would hope that they could guarantee it, but even the government of Tanzania is not sure it's staying in business with the terrorists. So, yeah, being another Cancun, don't think. Well, mind you, one of the lodges that's been there the longest, you can see this all on the internet. Again, I wanted to show you all the pictures of places, but copyright. I called the owners of these lodges. No, it's copyright. Okay, fine. Go on the internet and look up Ngorongoro lodges, or safaris, and see where you can go. And this one particular place, I said, Holly, come look at this. Boy, are they proud. $1,000 a night per person to stay in this lodge, and it's not the Hilton either, but they had a bathtub. That's good. A toilet, indoor toilet. But there are others. If you like camping, they take safaris out in tents, and you can do that for $150 a day. But it's commercial, and in fact, some of the Maasai have now realized that Europeans coming in there will buy trinkets, and so sadly, you come into the Maasai village and they put on a show for you and do the in-place dancing up and down where they jump up and down, and sell you trinkets they've made. And okay, that's all right. But I don't like to exploit people like that. And but you can see how they say, well, look, wealth comes from these people to come see our dirt here. That's great. Let's sell stuff. I would hope that somehow or another we could help them. I'd rather spend money there than on a lot of the things our government throws it away on. And the world, for that matter. It's not just America. The world should foot the bill for this. It is our place. It's our homestead. Yes, sir.
Just one quick question about the time frame. I wasn't quite certain what you said in front of when Adam and God didn't actually exist. Was that 6,000 years? Is that?
It was back then, very early in the piece, 6,000 years ago. And if you read the Bible, you'll see that they didn't have children in the garden. They were old enough to have sex and to be aware of their parts. But then God took them out of Eden over into Ethiopia probably, or Kenya. And there's where they had Cain and Abel and their other descendants outside the garden. They never procreated inside the garden because they sinned. 6,000 years. Yeah, I was just kind of adding to that, just ad lib.
Where is the garden in relation to the equator, and what is the kind of climate that they have there now? Is it real hot? Is it real wet?
During the wet season, it is very wet, muddy. During the dry season, very dry, sandy, dusty. But they do say the best time is sometime in the wet for the vegetation and the beauty of it. The equator, I'm just trying to think on that. Equator would run through where? North Africa? Egypt? Does the equator run through? Yeah. So it would be slightly south of the equator, but not far. It would be warm, hot, and a lot of flies. The livestock around there that they raise, you get cattle flies, and so you'll be doing the Australian wave like this a lot if you go. I just wish we could organize a bunch of people to go over so they wouldn't dare kidnap any of us. We could go in there and walk the valley and take the photos and kick the tires and light the fires. Yes, ma'am.
After the flood, it just destroyed everything. And I understand where the rivers, where the proof that the rivers ran through there.
All right.
But you said the locals had stories.
Well,
Do you think they were just drawn there for some reason?
possibly, but understand that after the flood, Noah designated the 3 areas for his sons, to occupy. Well, Ham took Africa. Shem came around the backside into Madagascar, India, that way. And they had descendants. And they told their descendants, you know, here's the story over there across, well, now there's a big sea there, but they used to be joined to us. The Aborigines in Australia told us, yeah, we originated in Africa, but we walked across, you know, in underground or whatever.
So they were able to recognize some of the terrain after the water was.
Well, they knew where the Kilimanjaro and where the volcano fields were. And they could find the riverbeds for sure up in that area. But the locals just knew that it was, well, that's the mountain of God. And the mountain of God was next to the place where we were created. So, it was because of the migrations of people who knew where it was. And after the flood settled, of course, you'd know that that was the land. I mean, they settled it. The mud dried, and people settled the area all over the place. And that was just the one they referenced as the starting point. Fascinating place. That leads us to the next adventure in finding Atlantis.